Hi guys, my name's Doug. Welcome to my massive garage. In today's video, we're going to be doing some wiring on Project Pontoon boat. We've got some new switches, stereo, and a horn. Anyways, stick around, check this out. Thanks a lot for watching. The first step in our little electrical adventure is to finish cleaning up the remnants of the force outboard that I used to have installed on this boat. The trim tilt switch is off of the force because the hand controller didn't have a switch on it, and of course the ignition switch used to be here, and now with the Yamaha that is included in the controller. My plan is to install this rocker switch assembly. It's about the right height. It is a similar style to the upper one, and it has a nicer black finish than the upper one does. The anodizing on the upper one almost kind of faded off to silver. We'll make this work though, and what I'm going to be putting on this switch panel is all of the accessory stuff. The chart plotter when it's mounted. Another chapter in this little video is going to be installing a stereo, and the washdown pump, and a future live well project that I plan on putting together. So let me strip this out of the way and we'll start laying out how we're going to mount this switch panel. As you can see, I lay out masking tape on the surface of the panel. This has a texture to it. If you get Sharpie marker on this, it'll be very hard to clean it off of the surface, so use masking tape. That way, as you can see, some of the lines don't end up permanently marking the panel. What I've done here is measure the maximum distance of the switch, measure the distance from the edge of the switch panel to the maximum distance of the switch, and then measure across all of the switches. Let me set you up on a monopod and I will show you how I open this up. First thing we're going to do is mark our corners, or cut our corners. I use a step drill. It goes through this plastic fairly easily. We just come in a little ways. You can see where I've got the tip of the drill. And we'll drill our hole. And go through until we get out to the line. And you can see there that we just ended up in the opening for the old trim switch. Not a problem. My preferred tool for doing this cutout is a die grinder, angled die grinder with a thin cutoff wheel in it. We've got another one with a Scotch-Brite pad on it for doing any fine cleanup that we need to do. If you don't have a die grinder in your toolkit, an angled grinder with a thin cutoff wheel also works. Give it a rough try, and fits in quite nice. I'm going to grab a blow snout and blow all this dust out of the way. I'll bring you back when I get things cleaned up. We've got the switch panel mounted. I was actually able to reuse that hole from the trim switch. Worked out quite nicely. I'm not going to wire this up right yet. We've got a few other tasks to take on here before we get to the wiring. That'll be its own chapter. And on to the next mess. Next chapter in the little electrical project we've got going on here is installing the horn. I've been talking about this ever since I put this original switch panel in. I've got a specifically labeled momentary switch for a horn, but I haven't managed to get this installed yet. So the way this works, we've got to cut out a hole that matches the back side of this template. There's foam on the back of here. This will come in from the outside and attach with this nice grill on the outer surface. Make it all look professional. And I don't really want this blowing back at me when we're going down the lake. You hit the horn, get the blast in the face. That's not going to be a whole lot of fun. So I think what I'm going to do is shift gears, move around to the front side of the console, and we'll figure out where we're going to mount it there. I've kind of decided this is where we're going to mount the horn, in this area here. There's cup holders up here that we need to come down so far. I need to stay below those. And I've removed the horn motor from the backside of the mount. So I think we'll do is we'll just trace that out there. Of course, the tricky part is going to be that we can't cut the outside of this, because then it'll just fall inside the panel. This bezel here, or this edge, is what we're going to have to line up on the front of the console. Another reason that I have chosen to put it towards the middle of the boat is so that it's not blasting right in the ear of whoever's sitting on the couch behind me. That looks relatively straight. Start off marking the holes. And that is essentially what it will be when it's done. Except I think we'll probably put the writing on the bottom. Let me take some measurements and lay this out, and I'll bring you guys back when I'm ready to start cutting. This cutout's going to be a little bit more of a challenge than the previous one. The previous one was rectangular in shape. This one has these nice rounded corners, and I don't want to go straight out because that will go out past the bezel and will show up. So I'm going to cut a little bit conservatively on this one. I cut inside the lines a little bit further than I did on the previous one, and cutting inside the lines will allow me to sand it out to shape so that this fits in perfectly. We'll start off with holes in the corners here. I don't know that they're really necessary, but now we'll cut out with the die grinder. Now we have the tricky part, those radiused corners. Try and do it with the die grinder. Switch to the scrubby pad. Okay, let's do a test fit. Almost, but not quite. So we've got it all cleaned up. Fits in there nicely. Let's peel the tape off of here. And then we can mount the horn. For those of you that are interested, this is the large Pontoon steering console from pontoonstuff.com. As you can see, it's pretty heavy duty roto-molded plastic. Nice and solid. There we are. We'll call this chapter 2 finished. We've got the horn mounted. Of course, we haven't done any connection. That's going to be its own chapter in this little project. But on to the next one. The next chapter in our little electrical project is going to be installing the AM, FM, Bluetooth, USB, auxiliary, I don't know what all features it has. Anyways, it's basically installing a stereo. And my plan is to mount the stereo on this panel here. So we have in the box a little template, some instructions, and the basic stereo. Now the trick part here is, because it uses a U-shaped bracket to hold it in, we have to make sure that we don't cut a hole that's too overly large, but still large enough that this goes in. And again, the hole is not square in shape, so we're going to have to kind of work the die grinder when we're doing the cutting. Let me tape it up and figure out exactly where I want to put it, and I'll bring you guys back when I'm ready to start cutting. What the manufacturer has done here that is convenient is they have included the center out of the gasket. So there's the gasket that goes around the outer edge, kind of squishy foam, and they've just included the center. So we'll use the center as a template. Now it's still attached to the sticky or to the backing paper here, which keeps the stickiness from grabbing everything, and could just peel it off and stick it on there to use as a template, but I figure we'll just take these scissors We'll cut the backing paper back down to be even with the foam. That looks like as good a place as any. Good enough edge distance here, and still leaves enough room. We could mount something else here if we ever need to. And that is where the stereo is going to live. Let me cut it out. You don't need to listen to all that noise, and I'll bring it back when we're ready to start fitting the unit. And we've got this all mounted. I'm quite happy with how that looks. I do have a USB port on order. I'm not sure exactly where I'll end up mounting it, but it'll be a USB port with an 1/8 inch stereo input, so that you can plug like an iPod or a USB jump drive, that kind of thing, into this. Down below here would look fine. That should work. When it arrives, it'll probably be a next summer edition. The next problem we have is the stereo speakers that I ordered in. The next step in our little project here is figuring out what we're going to do for speakers. My original plan was to mount speakers here in this panel, just kind of centering on the panel, and run them from there. They won't fit in the console, so that's as good a place as any. However, I plan on replacing these couches in the spring. I'm thinking of getting some new roto-molded and upholstered seats from pontoonstuff.com, and so mounting them in these seats doesn't really do anything for me. I'll end up having to remount them in the new seats when I replace these. However, I do have another option. Here I have a couple of carpeted 6x9 boxes. These came out of a truck that has long since gone to the junkyard, and has just been sitting on the shelf in the garage, as you can tell by how dusty and dirty they are. However, I do think I am just going to drill a hole in the bottom of these couches, run the wires, and temporarily set up these 6x9s as speakers. And they'll do for now. They are a glued particle board box, so they're not going to stand up to any water at all. They'll end up swelling up and essentially being wrecked. But for now, they'll do the job. This is inside of the couch, and not too far forward here is one of those aluminum stringers. Kind of runs under here. I wouldn't be surprised if these bolts go down into the stringer. However, if we drill a hole right at the absolute back, like right in here, that should hopefully give us clearance to get by that aluminum stringer underneath. By putting it kind of in the back corner there, it puts it over top of the pontoon, gives us good support for running the wires back to the console. Yeah, we'll try the step drill, see how that works. There, we're all the way through. Let me repeat that for the other side, and I'll bring you back when I'm ready to start running wires. We'll start off on the right hand side here and run the wire down through the floor. Leave a couple of feet slack to connect up to the speaker box. Right back to the console. Admittedly, this is automotive grade speaker wire, not marine, but since this is a temporary install, I think this will do just fine. And it is. One of the conductors anyways is tinned, hard to see on the other one. I think it may be as well, in which case essentially it's marine. This is the wire for the right front speaker, and what I'm going to end up doing is tie wrapping it to the steering cable, because that kind of comes up into the general area of the stereo. It will work good as a kind of a wire tray to run this up. The speaker leads and power leads unplug quite nicely from the back of the stereo. And according to the manual, we've got our right front speaker is gray, and our left front speaker is white. The negative has the black stripe on it, and they have nicely stripped back a little bit of the wire for us. I'm going to fold that over just so that we've got a good solid connection. And we'll do the crimp on here. Good solid crimp. And we'll do the same on the positive lead. Blue and silver is not a normal color that I've encountered for speaker wire. Quite often I've seen silver and copper color, or even a solid jacket with a color coating on it. Doesn't really matter as long as you decide what you're going to use and you stick with it. In this case, we'll make the blue the negative. And while audio going to speakers is technically an AC signal, as in alternating both positive and negative spikes on the audio waveform, if you've ever looked at one on a computer or something. But the reason that you pay attention to polarity on the speaker is that if you get them crossed, one speaker will be, the cone will be going in while the other one is going out, and you can get kind of a wah 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 kind of effect going from your speakers. Won't hurt the stereo any, because it's just a speaker is just an electromagnet. It doesn't really care about polarity other than the direction it's going to pull or push. So I think we'll get this kind of sort of fed up into place and adjust our length accordingly. Then we'll run the other speaker lead. I'll bring it back when I've got that done. No sense watching me do it twice. Time to hook up the speaker, and I've got these, they're called a stake-on connector. They slide over the end of the wire and you crimp them down, and then they give a nice solid barrel for the spring clips on the back of the speaker. So gives a nice solid connection for the spring clips to grab onto. They're used quite often in industrial applications, and I don't see why they wouldn't work in audio. Typically, an audio connector you'd expect to see gold plated. We'll just use these tinned ones, or whatever flavor metal that is. I suspect it's just a coated copper, and hopefully it'll work well. Like most other electrical connections or electrical connectors, the size is governed, or color indicates size. We've got these crimpers, the same idea as the ratchet crimpers I use elsewhere. You squeeze in and it opens up. Then we stick it in, and you can see how the jaws come in from all four directions, kind of providing a square crimp. Nice solid crimp on there. And again, the blue is going to be our negative, and our silver will be the positive. One speaker hooked up. Now we're on to what I guess is the final chapter of this one, which is connecting up all of the wiring. Now, I can pretty much guarantee you guys don't want to spend half an hour watching me crimp on connectors and plugging things in. So what I'll do is kind of explain what I'm going to be doing, and then I'll do it and bring you back when it's all done. I've rejiggered how these switches are functioning, kind of why I didn't label them to begin with. We've got our nav. This was the chart plotter. Now it's going to be the nav lights, anchor lights, docking lights. This is going to be the accessories, which powers this panel up, and this is the master switch that powers everything up here. Down here we will have the chart plotter. This will be the stereo. Then we're going to have the washdown pump. I'm going to guess this is probably going to be the live well, and a couple of extras. So let me start hooking things up underneath, and I'll bring you back when I'm done. Well guys, the wiring is done. We've got our accessory switch panel installed. We've got all the switches labeled now. I've got the Garmin Echo Map sitting up in its cradle. We've got our Velex stereo installed, and we've got the speakers under the front. Up there we've got the back of the stereo. We come down to the plugs, and we've got cables routed down here. I'm not a big fan of directly connecting the stereo to the battery, but that is how it's supposed to be hooked up. Over here we got a little bit of cable management done. My cheesy green labels are still on the wires, and that's the back of the switch panel. Ground block, and I got the cables kind of have strain relief on them here. Unfortunately, the sticker pack that I was using didn't have a master, so we'll just put that funky label on it. We've got our accessories, Hornworks. We've got the power to the Garmin. We've got the deck wash hooked up, We've got our lights. I'm using this for the sign for the docking lights. Kind of matches what we got at the front. And these 3 unlabeled switches are still set up as spares. Live well will go on one of those, and the whatever else I decide I need on this thing. If you haven't guessed, I kind of like electronic gizmos, so wouldn't be surprised if I end up filling this panel up completely. Everybody's probably wondering how the stereo sounds. Of course, it's not going to turn out very well on the microphone here. This is 45 times 4. I only have 2 speakers hooked up, so really we're only getting 45 by 2. Turn on, Bluetooth on, USB. And the music I'm playing is from the YouTube copyright free library, so shouldn't end up with a copyright strike for this. So you'll notice that I have the couches flipped open, the speakers hidden in underneath the couches. That seems to soak up an awful lot of their volume, and definitely if I had the motor running, we wouldn't be able to hear this stereo. Now this does have outputs for an amplifier and a remote trigger for an amplifier. If I find that I need more volume, I can always add an amp and have a little bit more. Fairly happy with how it sounds. As I say, they're just a set of speakers I had kicking around, nothing special. And once we get the new couches mounted in the front, we'll get the new speakers installed, and hopefully things will sound a little bit better. Maybe I'll be able to mount these 6x9s at the back of the boat and then have 4 speakers available. That's for next year. Anyways, that is basically what we've got going on today. Thanks a lot for watching. Please remember to like, subscribe, and I appreciate it if you could leave me a little comment, tell me what you thought of this. On to the next mess.